Welcome to Christendom Conversations. Together we'll explore the wisdom of the Catholic intellectual tradition, engage with thought-provoking ideas, and uncover deep insights into the perennial questions. We're thrilled to have you with us. Let's dive into today's conversation. Well, it's a great pleasure to have Dale Ahlquist here for this episode of Christendom Conversations. Thank you for joining us.
My great pleasure, George.
So you're a convert. You're also one of the world's leading experts on G.K. Chesterton. So can you give us some background? How did all that come about?
Well, I can definitely confirm that I am a convert. I'm not sure about the other,
Okay.
but it's the second thing that led to the first thing. It was reading G.K. Chesterton that really brought me to the Catholic Church. He was my companion that whole pilgrimage, which was about 16 years from the time I started reading Chesterton to the day I was received into the Catholic Church.
Wow.
He describes conversion, he himself a convert, as you go through three stages. The first stage is you decide to be fair to the Catholic Church, which means you're not going to be so much against it as you were before, but it doesn't mean you're going to be for it. But he does say that actually there is no being fair to the Catholic Church. You're either for it or against it, and as soon as you stop being against it, you start rooting for it.
Right.
You start being for it. So really that first decision is the fatal one when you decide you're going to be fair to the Catholic Church. But then the second stage is learning about the Catholic Church, discovering it. It's like being in a foreign country with these exotic animals and butterflies that you never knew existed, and you're just taking it all in. That's the fun part. It's exotic at that point. And that's what it was for me, certainly, learning all the things that I never knew before. But then comes the third stage, running away from the Catholic Church. So, you have to make all your intellectual objections, and then they all get addressed. But in the end, it's an act of the will. And you have to say, I do. And that is where the struggle is. And when you make that decision, when you say yes, it's an act of humility. It really is. You're bowing your head, literally, and that's how it ends. You bow your head, and suddenly you're inside the church. And as Chesterton says, it's larger on the inside than it is on the outside.
That's right. When I entered the church, 2005, I was in Anglican. We were an Episcopalian parish at that point, and I described it to my Episcopalian friends as I was submitting to the Bishop of Rome. So there was an act of the will that was the hardest part, because you're right, the church does have a way of answering all of your questions. We discovered that either what we thought the church taught, we were wrong, and it actually taught something different, or what it taught actually made sense. And so it's a complicated process. But 16 years, that's interesting. Well, how do you account for the relevance of G.K. Chesterton today? Why is he so popular?
Well, I think he's popular now for the same reason he was popular during his lifetime. He's so witty and likable, first of all. There's just this joyful, attractive quality to him. That's on the surface level. Underneath that there's a level of goodness, and you're attracted to the goodness. But that wit of his profound insight into the human condition, into God himself. He's a mystic, but he's just dressed up as a fat journalist. And that's such a great juxtaposition. But you could say that Chesterton himself, who was the master of the paradox, is a walking paradox. So he's being rediscovered and re-enjoyed because what he said was true then. It seems to be even more relevant and more true now.
Yeah. The idea that he embodies the paradox that he seemed to love so much is really intriguing, because he began as a poet, right? That was he loved poetry. There was like a poet. He was a hidden poet inside. Yeah, can you say a bit about his journey, his own journey intellectually?
Sure. He says that most of us are poets. The majority of people are poets. The ones who aren't are critics. And so he says it's more natural to be a poet than not to be one. And he says if we were all real enough, we'd all talk in rhyme. So it showed his fascination with just language itself. Wow. And, poetry is trying to get language to operate on a higher level. And, the great irony of a poem is you can say more with less. Yeah. But he also was a prose writer, and he expressed himself just so clearly. And he tried to make his prose sound poetic, which he said is much better than trying to make your poetry sound prosaic. And guess what has happened? So, so I have to say that his intellectual journey to the faith, which is what it was really an intellectual conversion, also took a long time, as did mine. But he was thinking like a Catholic for a long time before he was one. In fact, he admitted that he was standing at the door ushering other people into the church without having entered himself. And I think one of the reasons, no question, was he did everything with his wife, totally depended on Frances Chesterton as she did on him. And the idea of doing something without her was really unthinkable. And she just simply was not ready to become a Catholic. And so he had to make that step by himself. And it was a bittersweet day, actually, for both he and his wife when he was received into the church.
Yeah. I think there's a story of him having to call his wife and ask her where he's supposed to be at the given moment because he was absent-minded and had gone somewhere else. Can you tell us about that? What was it like inside his head?
Yeah, so he was famously absent-minded, and the story which he never denied was that it wasn't a matter of calling his wife because you can't pick up the phone. So he gets off a train, he goes to a telegraph station.
That's right. Yeah.
Sends a telegram to his wife saying, "Am at Market Harbor. Where ought I to be?" And she realized that it was going to be too complicated to explain in a telegram, so she just wrote home. And
that's funny.
Got him back to Beaconsfield and then put him on the train again with better instructions to get him to his destination. He once hailed a cab to take him to his own office, which was, where he ran GK's Weekly. Didn't know the address of GK's Weekly, and so the cab driver had to stop at a newspaper stand to get a copy of the paper to get him to his own office. And, he said absent-mindedness is simply present-mindedness about something else. Yeah. And that describes him perfectly. He was always thinking, always deep in thought, always writing the next article. And so those mundane things about where you're supposed to be, someone else has to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we are obviously, our work here is education. And so there is this exciting movement now, the Chesterton schools. Can you tell us a bit about that and how that came to be?
It's the short answer, it's a miracle. I don't know how it happened, but you're right. Here we are. We started one Chesterton Academy 17 years ago, and it was really for the main purpose of sending my younger kids to a good high school, and we couldn't find it. And so we tried to create one that was the kind of school we were looking for. And by that time, my oldest son, Julian, who is a graduate of Christendom College, he was our first history and philosophy teacher at the school. He's actually now the senior faculty member. He's been on the faculty since day one, 17 years ago. Well, the school got started with a very integrated classical curriculum, very focused on the Catholic faith, the incarnation informing everything. And people started finding out about this school, and they came to us and said, we want to do the same thing that you're doing. And we said, we don't know what we're doing, but we started putting it together and, on paper and started helping other people start schools. We've never gone out and solicited and say, you need to start a Chesterton Academy. Everyone has come to us, and there are now 62 Chesterton Academies open around the country with another 20 to 30 in the pipeline for the next 3 years. And it's just been a great grassroots movement of parents taking back the Catholic education of their students, and also, really preparing their minds to be clear and complete thinkers. So you're forming their souls and their minds, and we've just seen beautiful results. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Well, I'm wondering, there's a broader movement of classical education. So I'm wondering what is the secret sauce that makes Chesterton's academies Chestertonian?
Well, you said secret sauce, and you also said the answer. Chesterton. That is the secret sauce. He is the complete thinker. He's the model thinker. He's the kind of thinker we want our students to be. He did write about everything, and he put it all together, and we're trying to get students who will make all the connections. The modern approach to education has been to separate everything from everything else. This is the integrated approach, and this is why there's such a revival of classical learning, is putting it all together. But we just have a really good curriculum that we just give it to the people. Here it is. They don't have to think of any of that work is all done for them.
Right.
But Chesterton is the secret sauce, George.
Yeah. Well, his love of paradox, his the sort of joyful approach. I assume that's part of the ethos too of the school.
Oh, amen. You're right. Everyone who visits the school, the first thing they notice is the joy. They notice the laughter as they're walking through the hallways, and we call ourselves joyfully Catholic. And that's just that's a paradox in most people's minds. They don't think of the Catholic Church that way, and it's a great surprise to them. Both families that have been raised Catholic and those who've coming from the outside. Right. This is a big surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so one of the questions that we for obvious reasons, we're talking a lot about beauty, thinking a lot about beauty these days. What's the Chestertonian angle on how to think about beauty?
Well, one of the things we do at the school, for instance, is we have a very well-developed fine arts program. Okay. So all the students do drawing and painting for 4 years, so that at the end of their senior year, they complete an oil masterpiece. They copy an oil masterpiece. Wow. 4 years of required choir, so they're all singing beautiful polyphony and wonderful choral works by the end of their time, and then 3 years of required drama. All the students. It's not just an elective. It's not an after-school activity. It's a class. Wow. And my wife, who runs the drama department, says, it's the most integrated of all the arts. You're putting everything together, plus you're putting your academic skills together in interpreting a text, and you are literally making the word into flesh when you put on a play.
Yeah,
and it builds camaraderie among the students. It's a team sport. And they learn how to get up and express themselves and be confident in front of an audience, so that what we're putting into their heads, they can start bringing to the rest of the world. So that arts program really is how we, personify beauty at the schools. And the name of my talk I'm going to be giving tonight is a line from Chesterton: "Beauty is unanswerable." It wins the argument all by itself.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, and you've partially answered another question I have, which is that, it's easy to focus on the grid of courses that students take and the books that are read on the syllabus. But a lot of schools say they form the whole person. But how you do that that's often up for grabs. And there are a lot of ways you can go wrong in that process.
Amen.
So could you say a bit about that integrated formation and how the schools do that?
Well, one, of course, is daily mass. And most schools will also offer daily confession. If there's a priest there to say mass, there's usually a priest to hear confession too. Right. And so having the sacraments available on a daily basis, that's the center of the day. And then spiritual retreats throughout the year by each class, and then an all-school retreat, and then special classes of spiritual formation throughout the year too. So just those are the direct spiritual things we do. But then we just really work on integrating the faith into each class, not just the theology class, right, but in all the other classes. You're teaching the Catholic faith in every subject.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you found that the students are prepared. I know the ones that come here are prepared.
Well, the ones who come here are prepared. I'm glad to hear. Even the ones that go to prison have been prepared.
Oh, that may. We don't want to. As you know, educators can't take the full credit or the full blame, and there is some responsibility on the part of the students. So.
We're really blessed to see how well formed these kids are when they go out the door, and as you know, they do well in the colleges that they attend.
Yeah.
They bring something to the school, but they're also going to be absorbing what they learned because they've been trained to have that kind of a mind.
Yeah, because so much of, as you mentioned a moment ago, the tendency is to think in fragments, to think of breaking things apart. And if you've been habituated to thinking in terms of the whole, that's one of the biggest battles. And then wonder. I think wonder is a part of what you do as well.
It's very Chestertonian.
Yeah. How do you cultivate wonder in students?
Well, the first book they read that's a Chesterton-related book is the one I wrote called Common Sense 101. And the first two chapters of that book just emphasize, one is wonder and the other is paradox. Those are the two things. If they get wonder and paradox down, that's going to take them the rest of the way through the 4 years.
Yeah. Because it seems like it's almost like an engine.
Yeah.
Right? Because the wonder you've opened up to all of reality. But then the next, it's like the first major temptation is to reduce everything to a single thing. And paradox prevents that from happening. So I say if you can keep those together, it seems like a perfect combination.
That's right. It is.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you have in some ways built, but you inhabit, you work within this very multifaceted Chestertonian world. So there's Gilbert, the magazine. There's you're president of the society. You've done a series for EWTN. Can you talk a bit about that universe, the Chestertonian universe? What does that look like these days? And if someone is interested in going into that, what are the different places they can go to learn about Chesterton?
Well, we increased our publishing presence. There's more and more books by and about Chesterton that are available. Those old EWTN videos, they somehow hold up. Just like good old Gilligan's Island episode. They somehow work.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Yes,
and I've never watched them myself. You got to understand. Sure. It's like Chesterton said about orthodoxy. He said, I'm always ready to write another book. I'm never compelled to read it. Yeah,
sure.
But the growth of interest in Chesterton, especially among young people, is demonstrated by the fact that he's this joyful writer we were talking about. But he one of the great Chesterton lines that we always repeat throughout the 4 years they have at the school is a line from the Everlasting Man: "A dead thing goes with the stream, only a living thing can go against it." Mm. And I think the thrill of Chesterton right now is how countercultural he is. The whole world's going one way, and then you've got this 300-pound cigar-smoking journalist from the early 20th century England who's telling it like it is in a way that is so refreshing and humorous and profound. And everyone is saying, "This is my guy right here."
Right. Yeah. That's wonderful. Well, and he's, I think, the idea of him being this was I think the title of your series, The Apostle of Common Sense. Mm-hmm. So can we drill into that a bit? What does that mean exactly? I mean, it has a metaphysical quality?
Yeah, certainly. So common sense, it refers to the truths that we all know to be true, but we either are afraid to say them or we haven't actually heard them come out of our mouths. So one of Chesterton's great strengths is he tells you what you already know, but he shocks you with the truth that you should already be familiar to you. It's one of the reasons why he's such a great detective story writer, is that he's planted a clue. It's sitting in front of your face the entire time, and then when he reveals a solution, you're just shocked, except you've been looking at it the whole time, and you've been looking. You go, "Oh, yeah, of course, that's it." Yeah, and so that's the great technique he does with common sense. He tells you what you already know, and it's so refreshing and affirming to hear these things and to hear someone actually say it. And so he claims that all of his paradoxes are just simply old truths that people have simply forgotten. They sound paradoxical because our thinking has gone backwards. Yeah. But the thing about common sense is it does bring people together. It's the truth that we have in common, but it's also the sense, which is both a physical and a mental, realization. And so Chesterton brings things to earth.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Well, you mentioned the Father Brown. So I'd like for you to say a bit more about that. My kids a few years ago bought me the CDs, the radio dramas. I think with Alec Guinness, I think playing Father Brown. There's these really old recordings.
Well, I didn't know about Alec Guinness to go on radio. He made one movie.
Yeah, I think there's a set of recordings, and I keep thinking Obi-Wan Kenobi is anyway. It's very disorienting to listen to this. But so, can you say a bit more about the Father Brown stories?
Yeah. So with the Father Brown, what Chesterton did is he created an anti-Sherlock Holmes character. He created the underdog detective. Sherlock Holmes is the super sleuth. Bullets bounce off him. Basically, he's got the answer, and it's going to be something that nobody else knows. He's going to pull some amazing, strange, bizarre truth that he knows because he can understand that the way you fold your pants makes you half Hungarian, right? And so, whereas Father Brown just sees something that no one else sees. He's on the same level as the reader and all the other characters in the mystery. Everyone is on the level playing field. He just sees the one thing that everyone else misses. But then he also has the handicap, which is every great detective has a handicap. But when the one that makes you an underdog is the thing that people say, well, that he's never going to be able to solve. What's Father Brown's handicap? He's a Catholic priest. They don't know anything. And so,
Right.
And everyone assumes, well, this innocent little priest, he doesn't get it. And doesn't occur to people that the guy who hears confessions all day might know something about how the evil, the evil motivation works, and might understand how evil works.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember two of the books that I read early on when I became Catholic were his biographies of Thomas Aquinas and St. Francis. Can you say a bit about those books and what kind of where they stand? Because they come up all the time.
Sure.
Often when someone is beginning to explore Thomas Aquinas, people refer to Joseph Pearce's book, but then they also refer to Chesterton as being two of the best.
Yeah.
What makes his writing on those saints so?
Well, I think what's so interesting is, can you think of two more different saints than St. Francis and St. Thomas? And yet, can you think of someone who could write about both of them so well? So he gets the mysticism of Francis. He gets the love for the poor of St. Francis. Certainly the deep connection to a divine revelation and putting that into the flesh. But then with Thomas Aquinas, the soaring intellectual heights to try to describe the thoughts of God as articulately as possible, to put it all together. So those are the two far reaches, and he puts them both together: the love of the poor and the love of truth. Yeah. And with Francis, the great line in that book is that for Francis, religion wasn't a theory but a love affair. And with Thomas Aquinas, you get down to that all of our senses are doors and windows to a reality that's really out there. There is and is. And this attack on the Manichae, the Puritan, the Platonist, who associates batter with evil. Chesterton's refreshing line: "There are no bad things, only bad uses of things." And you explain this to the students, and this is an eye-opening thing for them. Yeah. That God created the material world. The devil's never created anything. Yeah. So his insights are just so powerful and profound. I think the most interesting thing about the Thomas Aquinas book is that the thesis is that the Protestant Reformation is a reaction of the Platonists against the Aristotelians. Luther was an Augustinian monk who was very much a Platonist and just never went for the Aristotelian view that comes later with Thomas Aquinas. And so he calls it it's the revenge of the Platonists against the Aristotelians. And that's a different look at the Protestant Reformation, isn't it?
That is a different look. And even last night I was talking to one of my daughters who will be reading through one of our summer programs. She'll be reading The Republic. And I said, "Oh, that's great. I love Plato. I love the dialogues. There's so much to learn there, but just be careful of one thing." And it was that very warning. The incarnation changed everything. Yep. And I think we know from the book of Genesis that God made it and said it is good. It doesn't mean that there aren't problems, that the fall hasn't worked its way through so many aspects of reality, but there's a fundamental goodness there that we can't lose sight of. So anyway, that was my. I don't know if you'd lecture your children over dinner, but they have to listen to my TED Talks.
I usually have to listen to them at dinner now. I'm at that point where they just basically tell me what I should think. But I guess I've done some good thinking now. Yeah,
they had to listen to me long enough. I think that's probably a good thing. Well, I know that the Chesterton Academies have an international reach, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's it's another incredible thing. But we have in the next 2 years we'll be opening schools in Japan, Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, Spain, Argentina, Brazil. There's talk of one opening even in England.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I can't imagine that. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, that leads to my question, which is that if I know the schools are making their way out of this country. What is Chesterton's status in other countries?
Well, in some countries he's got a very high status. I would say Argentina, for instance. Almost everyone's heard of Chesterton in Argentina. Pope Francis was a big Chesterton fan. I was always waiting for him to quote Chesterton more. I only found him quoting him once during his pontificate, but there's a huge revival of interest of Chesterton in Spain, in Italy. The place you're not seeing any revival is in England.
Mm.
The prophet is without honor in his own country. It's but Canada, the U.S., big, huge followings, and but we're still hoping that someone in England might figure out that they've got someone pretty good of one of their native sons.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned the society, and you mentioned the EWTN series, and then there's also the magazine. What's next? Obviously, there are the schools. Are there other projects sort of in planning stages now?
I know of some films that are in the early development of some film treatments of some of his novels that we might see. A documentary is in the works on him. So those forms of media are coming too. I think there's going to be a greater web presence on things Chestertonian. We eventually will have all of his works available from our website, which that's taken years to put together because you cannot even begin to fathom how prolific he was. It's just astonishing. Yeah. I've been reading him for 44 years, and I know there's things that I haven't read yet.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. Well, my kids and I we rewatched Bishop Barron's his video. I think Pivotal Players was the series. Yes. Was on Chesterton, and that was a fascinating account. And there just seems to be so much opportunity now for growth to introduce new people to him and his work. That's interesting that there might be film treatments and might be other things. When you're not doing Chesterton, what are some things what do you do?
Well, I sleep, and
that's
yeah,
that's about it. Wow. Well, that's great.
Is there something else?
Far be it from me to suggest that there might be something other than that. Well, for those who maybe, heaven forbid, haven't read any Chesterton, there are different pathways in. I mentioned, I think the first thing I read were those St. Thomas and St. Francis books. Where would you recommend people begin? Yeah,
those are both excellent books to start with Chesterton. But I do recommend the two introductory books that I wrote on Chesterton. He can be very intimidating for the first-time reader. And so one is called The Apostle of Common Sense, and the other one is Common Sense 101, Lessons from G.K. Chesterton. That's what we start our students out with in their freshman year at Chesterton Academy.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. I'm very grateful for our time. And is there a website people should go to where they can start sort of as an entry point?
Sure, chesterton.org.
Okay.
Don't go to chesterton.com, George. You get hydraulic valves. Okay. And maybe that's what you need. Okay. But if you want G.K. Chesterton, chesterton.org.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
My great pleasure.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Christendom Conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about Christendom College and its mission, visit us at christendom.edu. Until next time, may we all continue to seek the truth, live the faith, and restore all things in Christ. God bless.